So welcome everybody to the Harry R. Hughes Center for Agro-Ecology webinar. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background about the Harry R. Hughes Center for your information if you're not familiar with us and our programs. We are a 501c3 organization that was founded in 1999. We are affiliated with the University of Maryland College of Ag and Natural Resources. And we're led by a board of 19 members that are stakeholders in agriculture, leaders in the agricultural community, in environmental organizations that are related to agriculture. And we also have two members from the legislature that are always appointed by the leaders of their respective legislature. Right now, our two legislative members are Delegate Regina T. Boyce and Senator Jason Gallion. And our board leads us in working to promote environmentally sound and economically viable agriculture and forestry as Maryland's preferred land use. And we do that through research, outreach, and collaboration. And we're highlighting one of those research efforts today. The focus areas that we work on, we really work through promoting scientific research, policy analysis, and outreach. And if you want to go to the next slide, Josh, it just gives a short overview of some of our work. Our research, again, focuses on agriculture, forestry, and the Chesapeake Bay, and we fund research that informs policymakers and state program leaders so that they can make good policy and program decisions with that are informed by research-based information. And that's one of our primary activities. We also do policy analysis and outreach and collaboration with the agriculture and environmental communities across the state. So today we're really pleased to introduce Jonathan Kays, who's going to talk about a project that we funded and has been highly successful. I should mention that we are recording this session and that you can also ask questions by clicking on the Q&A icon on your screen. So as we go along, please click on the Q&A, and then when Jonathan is done talking, we'll take those questions and have some question and answer period. We're really pleased to have Jonathan speaking with us today. He is a forest extension specialist with the University of Maryland College Park. Through his extension program, he implements education and research programs in forestry, wildlife, and then related areas of water quality. His work has informed forest owners, landowners, volunteers, natural resource professionals, citizens, students, youth, etc. He earned a BS from Cook College at Rutgers University and an MS from Virginia Tech. And with that, Jonathan, take us away.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, to correct a little bit, I used to implement programs. So I'm actually retired a year and a half. I'm an emeritus forestry specialist. And let me get my slides up here. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to ask Josh if can you see my slides correctly? They look okay?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about a project that we started back in 2019, funded by the Hughes Center. Like I said, I've been working since I retired in 2022 on this project a little bit, finishing some things up. But it's about improving, forest health on small acreage properties, with a specific focus on developing training and education resources for service providers for these small acreage woodland owners. And you can see a number of the folks that have been involved with this effort. This was kind of an extension of an ongoing program called The Woods in Your Backyard. This project allowed us to develop this into a larger partnership, thanks to the funding from the Hughes Center. And so let me just talk a little bit about the overview of the project and what the objectives were. And again, to train green industry professionals, of which we talk about arborists, landscapers, we include foresters in there, um, and even land managers for larger commercial properties. But to implement practices, we call them land care practices, improve forest health on small acreage properties. And part of this project was to develop a forest health assessment checklist that we could use, that could be used by green industry professionals with clientele, as well as the actual resources, and develop the resources, then provide training um, to them as foresters as well as volunteers. A lot of the folks that we reached in this project were actually volunteers, are those that work with nonprofits or manage larger properties held by nonprofits, and also develop a service provider directory that woodland owners could use to find this assistance they need, as well as website resources as well. So the question is, why all this big focus on small acreage properties? Being a forester myself, working with larger properties and timber harvesting and wildlife management, all that. The fact is that uh, in the state of Maryland and most places in the eastern U.S., really state and private foresters focus on properties or parcels that are over 10 acres. You have urban forestry programs that are managed through those urban forests, through urban forests in cities and developed areas. But what's really lacking has been forest management assistance for these smaller 1 to 9 acre parcels. And traditional foresters and forestry consultants don't have a lot of interest in these properties because a lot of that is based on timber harvesting and revenue and things like that. It's very difficult to justify that on small acreages. So it leaves us with this conundrum of sorts, because these 1 to 9 acre woodland parcels make up 2/3 of the ownerships in the eastern United States. In the state of Maryland, it's actually 85%. And that's anywhere from 5 to 23% of the actual acreage. So the point is that there's not really resources available to help these people make wise decisions and learn about what's available, as well as for service providers to help them. So that's really the focus of this program, to provide something that was lacking. Now, like I said, this was part of the Woods in the Backyard program, which actually started in 2006. And I'm just going to backtrack a little bit here, which started as a three-state effort with Pennsylvania and Virginia extension, um, as well as the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay was involved in some of this, but to develop a self-assessment guide for these small acreage landowners so they could educate themselves about natural resources and develop sustainable incomes. And it was this table-driven thing specifically tailored to folks who didn't have any required jargon, a series of activities, which was very successful. And we also developed a local delivery network using volunteers and so on. But again, the major challenge here was that getting people interested in these things, some of these things they're going to do themselves. But the fact is that many of these people wanted to hire somebody to help them do it. And it was very difficult finding those people. So um, the Woods in Your Backyard focused not just on existing woodland areas, but actually on transitioning mowed areas to natural use using tree seedlings and tree shelters. I'm just not going to give you much detail here. You can look this up for yourself, but that was the original focus of the Woods in Your Backyard program. And the guide itself, you see here, 108 pages, a quality resource available for $15 from Penn State. Um, and it's a series of 17 activities and case studies that people can use, and a workbook. We have an online course that goes along with it. We've sold over 20,000 of these. It's been a very, very popular resource. So the book itself uses a learning approach. You have a lesson, which we finally, you know, tuned down all this forestry and wildlife, water quality information into snippets of lessons, followed by a hands-on activity that people go out to their property. And it's kind of this table-driven uh, process, completing an activity sheet. And really what the user ends up with basically is kind of like a little forest stewardship or a woodland stewardship plan of things they could do on their property and how you can do it. Okay. Providing examples all the way, because a lot of this is new information to people. So it has 5 main chapters. Yeah, the wood introductory part, the part that a lot of people get a lot of information out of, is something new to them, is understanding all the ecological principles, succession and forestry and wildlife and so on. And then they do an inventory of their property with these different activities they do. They go out and assess these various habitat units on their land. Uh, then there's a series of land care practices that we go into that can be used. And then they kind of put this together into a plan for their property. And it's worked very well. So just to give you an idea of a piece of property like this, you have them develop or separate the land into different habitat areas that we call them, habitat units, relating this all back to wildlife, because that's what a lot of people's interest is. And from this, like these are some examples of the type of woods that were associated with this property. They go through the process of evaluating it for successional stages, species, and understory, and all this stuff, but in a way that doesn't require them to be an expert of anything. Um, we started this in 2006. We had people draw on maps, but we don't have to do that anymore. We got all kinds of resources, and the Maryland MD Merlin database is a great resource because it has all the overlays on it. So a lot of these, with the classes we do and stuff, it's easy to get stuff off the internet to help people get going. So land chapter 4, like I said, is the land care practices, and we divide up into 3 main areas: converting lawn to woodland, using herbicides and all the things you see here, modifying or improving habitat through the various activities that you see listed here. And then the kind of amenity-based thing in terms of improving aesthetics or recreation, creating a natural haven, putting in a trail. So this is all the stuff for the land care practices that are covered. And again, it uses this table-driven approach for each one of these management units or habitat units. And we provide examples on how do you, this example is how do you convert a lawn into trees? Well, it tells you how to do it. And there's other examples here on how to do it. So, and, you know, so not to go into any more of that, because that's been it's a very successful program up until we got this grant, because from 2006 to 2017, we sold over 18,000 of these books. We sold them and didn't give them away. Everyone was bought. So this is wide, many areas in our 3-state region, the Mid-Atlantic, as well as throughout places in New York State and other areas. We've had thousands of participants in workshops that could be 1 or 2 night workshops. They could be whole day. They could be single presentations. They could be field tours. And this is between Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania. We share our information, and we plan a lot of things together. And up until 2017, we also had 178 participants in the Maryland Woods in Your Backyard online course that was developed by Andrew Kling, and has educated a bunch more people since then. So the point is, okay, so we have this successful program. The problem is, when we do surveys, we found that 42% of the people contacted, 42% of the participants in a survey we did had contacted a service provider. But they didn't contact foresters because, foresters aren't real interested in this, more traditional ones. They were calling a green industry professional. They were calling an arborist. They were calling a landscaper. And a lot of folks just didn't have a lot of experience in this. So when we looked at this, we had to rethink about who can provide these woodland services, realizing they're probably not going to be foresters, but people that are already in the neighborhood working on these properties that are 1 acre, 3 acres, 5 acres, 6 acres, 8 acres, whatever. And that was really green industry professionals and landscapers and arborists. So that's what really came up with the idea for this whole grant. And the problem is, we're unsure of how large a market this is, although there is a market. And most of these folks that are in these professions are very unfamiliar with some of these woodland care practices, and converting lawns into natural areas, and doing some herbicide stuff in the woods and things like that. Anyway, so we developed this partnership as a result of this grant. We expanded the Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia extension group that we already had, and we expanded it to include the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay, the Virginia Department of Forestry, and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources was personally involved in this as well. Um, And so the role of this grant really was to say, okay, we have this woods in your backyard. We know we've reached a lot of landowners. How do we expand woodland health services for landowners, so they have service providers, by providing an educational opportunity for green industry professionals, for those that are interested in expanding the services they already provide into this new area and interested in learning about it. So that was our mission. And the secondary side of this is also the materials we developed, and I'll show you the woodland the woodland health practices handbook, and these are all resources that private landowners can use as well. Those that are interested in doing a lot more hands-on stuff themselves. So that's all good. So that's where we are. We actually created this cool logo up here, and we started in 2018. Was it I think it was, yeah, right. Um, but really it's in 2019. But these are the resources we developed. Okay, so on the left is the existing, 100 some odd page, high quality color book. But we wanted to basically develop a hands-on handbook on how do you do these land care practices. A lot more detail, a lot of pictures. And so through our, efforts, we developed this woodland health practices handbook, a practitioner's guide for creating, enhancing, and maintaining natural areas. And part of this as well was providing a tool that we could provide to the green industry professionals for working with clientele. And so we developed this woodland health assessment checklist with management actions. I don't know if you can see it, but this is really set up to be used with clients. It says the name of the business, the name of the client. That's what's on this front page here. So this is something they could go out to a client with, and using a color-coded process and stuff, help them make aware of some of the things that they could possibly do on their property, um, and expanding those services. Um, so the handbook kind of looks like this. It's 85 pages, full color, 10 authors. Um, it came out very, very well. We also ended up taking just the uh, you know just the actual practices in there, real hands-on stuff, and creating like a little handbook as well. The little field book. It's just a little field guide. And all these resources, because of our working together with the partnership, we were able to make these available and be sold through Penn State. You can call up and order them. $15 for an 85 full color book is not bad. So just to give you a kind of brief overview of the handbook itself, it has 5 chapters. The first chapter is on woodland ecology and the whole idea of succession. Okay, drilling into people that really what we're doing with all these woodland management, these land care practices, is that we're managing succession. Okay, pushing it ahead, pushing it back, and I'll explain that in a minute. The second part's using that assessment tool that I just showed you, on how to use that to educate and motivate your clients. Communications for 3. The bulk of the whole book is really chapters 4 primarily, because that's where all the land care practices are, a lot of details. And then that we provide a template plan that the professionals can use, very simple plan that they could use with clients to help outline the characteristics of the property they're working on, as well as what are some of the things they could do with the landowner to get some ideas out there. And then they could follow up with the actual costs. So the chapter 1's principal succession. We drill this through all our workshops. We manage wildlife by managing habitat. Okay, so, and we're managing succession. So when you look at a forest, from an open meadow to the forest, each species of wildlife is associated with various parts of the successional stages. So a lot of people are interested in wildlife, and you get this message across that, oh, so to manage wildlife, I have to have that habitat, and I can create that habitat by very simply doing one of 3 things. Cut and kill something, and we can plant something or do nothing at all. So try and really take it down to make it simple and something that many people can relate to. But this graph really helps summarize a lot of ideas. We use this woodland health assessment checklist and management actions, and I think you can see a little more clearly here the provider company, the employee performing the assessment, the date. So this is really meant to be used with clients. And so we have a checklist with some management actions and divided up into 4 areas of woodland diversity, composition, and structure, habitat value, and site level. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, just to show you kind of how it's set up, is to working with a client and saying, well, let's look at, is this an issue of concern, or is this an issue of lower concern? And like general tree health, I think we have an example here. Yeah. So general tree health, is it on the red side or on the green side? Is it trees have poor growth, low vigor, damage from storming, logging or storms? And the higher concern, trees appear healthy. So these are very generic things, but it helps get people thinking and looking at their woods. And then there's some of the actions that could be taken to help remedy the situation. So this has actually been a very good tool working with landowners in general, something they can do. So this chapter 3 is really kind of trying to use the right words. We're all in this jargon thing, but when we talk about forestry and we talk about maybe when you're cutting things and people get upset about that, we don't kill, things. We control or harvest or manage. We don't log, we harvest trees. Um, you know, we we don't have most people. If you ask most people if they have a forest, they'll say no, but I have woods in the back. And in fact, that's the reason we call this the woods in the backyard, because when we first started the project, we did some surveying with landowners, and we asked them exactly that. So, do you have a forest in your backyard? You have a forest on your property? They go, no, but I have woods in the back. So that's how we called it woods in the backyard, and people relate to that. So anyway, just some things for people when they're talking with landowners. Um, the bulk of the woodland practice handbook, health practices handbook, is really the land care practices and divided into 2 main sections. The first is converting lawn to natural area through planting, natural succession, some occasional mowing, maybe creating wildflower meadows or whatever. Um, and these are just some pictures I throw out there, like creating new areas. Basically tree seedings with tree shelters. That's what we're talking about. And I know when I first started doing this project and talking with landowners, we say, yeah, we're going to probably plant about 350, 400 trees to the acre. And their eyes lit up, because when most people think about planting trees, they're thinking about bald and burlap tree that costs $70 or $80. So we're talking about tree seedlings that, cost $1 or something a piece. So there's various ways to do that. Here's a couple of examples. And this is very, very attractive to a lot of people, as naturalizing backyard areas that they used to mow. The other thing is managing old field succession, letting what's going to come in, and of course you have to control the invasive species by you start doing things like that. Um, uh, there could be around home like this. It's from Southern Maryland, but just allowing open fields, and you mow it every 40 years, providing a range of options for landowners by which to manage their acreage property that may be 4 acres or 5 acres, but they want some grass around the house, but they don't want to be mowing 4 acres of grass. So on the right side, it may be that's actually haying. You just have somebody, the farmer, come in and hay it every couple times a year. So the part 2 of land care practices is improving existing habitat. This is where you have existing woodland. And this includes, establishing or improving riparian buffers, tree thinning through chosen tree management, pruning, wildlife openings, putting in trails, and controlling invasive species, which is a huge issue now, and a real motivator. I'd say a hook for a lot of landowners is controlling invasive species. Truth be told, we'll never control invasive species, but it surely makes for a lot of people's livelihoods. So, um, so here's an example of a riparian buffer, that's been put in place here instead of an open, mowing down to the edge of the stream, something like that. Um, crop tree management, or we call it chosen tree management now, where you're actually thinning individual trees in the woods. And so if you have a few oaks or something, you release the trees around it, kill the trees around it. There's a number of ways to do that. So you have these nicer trees that they can grow into the future. Yeah, that's what we call it, chosen tree management. Developing wildlife habitat, thickets. This is actually my house here on the top, wintertime, and there's lots of habitat back here, but wildlife habitat is messy. So for some people, that's difficult to understand, but even taking lawns and just allowing the field edges to kind of grow in and creating that range of successional habitat really improve wildlife habitat. Great bill. And of course, build the trail and take the tail. Build the trail and tell the tale. I used to get a lot of calls from people, and they go, "Well, I got 3 acres of the woods," and I asked them, "Have you ever been back there?" And they say, "No." So because I can't get back there. So one of the first things people can do is put in a trail. And again, this is a service that many arborists or landscapers could provide. Especially as a winter job, which is when work's a little bit lower. So, and I'll just mention that some of these things can be, winter services, like controlling invasive species. Some of that can be done in the wintertime when other work is slow. So we do spend a lot of time talking about herbicides. We have tables in there, what herbicides to use, how they work, the different application methods, um, and very clear about that, because for a lot of the things people want to do on larger acreages, you know, anything above a small house lot, in many cases, is going to require herbicides probably to be very effective. And I think even a lot of people have kind of realized that, especially with invasive species. So anyway, that's that. Controlling vines. One of the best things people can do is kill vines because they just rip trees up. So here's the land care plan that you see here. It allows people to plug in the information that comes off of the checklist. So this is all meant to work together, okay? And this is an example of some of the stuff. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is in the book, but this is just something that a green industry professional can use with a client to the degree they want to help them make aware what they have and what they can do. What are some of the opportunities? So our partnership, this is our group um, from Penn State, Maryland, Virginia, Craig Highfield with the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay, and a good friend of ours, Jim Finley, who was responsible for a lot of the early efforts of this from Penn State. He unfortunately died a few prematurely, I would say, from an accident, but just really good people. We've been in this. These are the folks that have been in this since we started the grant, since the first day we started the grant. And well, yeah, I think they will, to have some effort into it in the future. So we developed these great resources. Now, what do we do with them? Well, we have COVID. Okay. So I will say that COVID was really responsible for actually a lot of the creativity came because we were able to it was hard to hire people. So we were able to use a range of personnel and reorient things that we were able to develop those great resources I described to you. But then how do we deliver it? Well, we can't do hands-on stuff because of COVID. So we developed a number of webinar series, and from fall of 2020 to the fall of 2023, we did 4 webinar series. And we recorded them. We did them as a 3-state group. We all registered, for many of them, we registered our people in our state, but we all, were speakers that all involved with the same offering. And sometimes, we hosted an event, Penn State hosted a number of them, but it was a group effort. And you can see some of the audiences that we looked at, but at the end of the day, we had over 500 individual participants, but if you have 100 people and they have 5 webinars, that's 500 people. So I'm only counting actual individuals, not if I wanted to get the numbers way up there, I could, repeat and repeat. But all these webinars were very professional. Just to give you an example of some of the offerings we had, this was the first one, four webinars, that you see listed here, kind of explaining the whole business aspect of this and about what's in the guide and, how to use these land care practices and things like this. And I think we had over 200 people for that one, in total registered. Um, and again, this was another one that was done in 2021. This was actually this was 8 webinar series, uh, Tuesday and Thursday for a month. Um, and all of these things were videotaped, okay, by Zoom, and basically they're all on our website, so they're all there for people to review. What kind of, we did exit surveys, and this is kind of stuff we got, 71% improved moderately or a lot of their confidence to provide what we call these natural area management services, NAMs for short. And 50% will incorporate them in their business. And we did find that 20% are already doing it. At least they say they're already doing some of these things. And a large percentage expected some profitability increases. And when you look at the attendees that came, most of them were tree oriented, and a lot of them came out of the landscape industry. But we also had a lot of folks that were government, they managed government properties or NGO and PO. That's supposed to be NGO properties, and some foresters as well. So we thought we did a really good job with the webinars. It was very professional. We reached a lot of people. Just before I retired in April of 2022, I organized a Train the Trainers workshop where I wanted to share this information with folks from other states around the country. And so we had a one day or overnight workshop in Hagerstown to train other organizations on how to use these resources in educational outreach. And we, targeted professional education organizations, Extension and departments of forestry and others. And we had 26 people from 18 different organizations in 9 different states. And I had a professional videographer come and actually record all the sessions and distilled it down into a couple of very concise videos, which again can be used by other states or other people who are interested in offering this type of program. And those are on our website as well. I'll give you the website at the end. And just to give you a follow-up, we did an 8th-month follow-up with these folks. And so we had 14 responses out of that in total. But the point is that a third of these had organized a Woods in Your Backyard workshop, and a third planned to. And Ohio created a new online course based on what we had to offer. I think another state to do maybe as well. Most of them made presentations to landowners. Most of them, a large percentage of them, linked our website resources to their actual website. So we felt really good that we had really taken what we had done and expanded it and sent it out there for other people to use. And we still get responses from folks and see people in meetings, whatever, and they say, "Oh yeah, thank you for that stuff. It's good stuff." Woods in Your Backyard, actually, Penn State renamed all their forestry outreach called the Woods in Your Backyard extension. So they used the name, and they have a 9-week course in the winter based on this whole idea, and they have like 500 people come for this course in January, February, and everyone gets a book. Everybody gets a manual, and then they're also made available of the stuff that we offered in terms of the Woodland Hand Practices Handbook and so on. So in terms of Maryland, thanks to Andrew Kling and the great work he's done, my colleague, he developed this non-credit online course based on the book, the initial book, and that's been done in the Mid-Atlantic area. And over the course of 10 weeks, it's offered twice a year. He offers it twice a year. Since 2016, there's been over 359 participants, 16 states, and over 5,000 acres. So again, why they benefit from this, and that the books that we produce through this grant project are also made available to them if they wish to purchase them additionally to what they get. Part of also this idea of getting information to landowners in terms of businesses are interested, we developed a online directory on our website for service providers, so people could self-populate that and put their names of their businesses on there, what they offer. And that's available for landowners that if they're looking for someone to do work on their property. And we've had 16 businesses. They've self-applied to be in the directory. And so, I mean, it's that's something. It's out there, and maybe we'll put some more effort into that. I don't know, but that was part of one of the ideas to make this. Once folks are interested, let's try and get their names out there. We're not guaranteeing anything, obviously, but these are folks that have actually taken the effort to take some training. In terms of other offerings, but there's a bunch out there. The that we There's still ongoing regional workshops in Virginia and Pennsylvania and other areas. I know that the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay with Craig Highfield has done a lot of work, and Cornell Extension in New York have done their own landowner workshops, and other states are using some of these materials as well. So I guess what I'd just say is that the partnership itself is very successful. I kind of led that effort. Now being retired, things are kind of in a little bit of a hiatus. We'll see what happens with that. But I think everybody benefited from it, professionally as well as individually in terms of helping landowners and helping the green industry businesses. So at the end of the day, I wanted to do a follow-up of all those 527 people we had that had attended the webinars over those 4 webinar series. And one thing I know about arborists, and I remember those of you may know Stanton Gill, who unfortunately recently passed away, he would always tell me that arborists in the landscape industry are basically terrible at filling out surveys. Well, he was right. So I got 8% response rate after what I consider a concerted effort. But I just pulled off a few things, but a large percentage of them share the materials with others. 30% plan to. So 45% had shared the materials with employees. Another 14% plan to. 24% or about a quarter had completed a woodland health assessment for a client, and another 50% or so plan to. And 29% had used that land care template I showed you, develop a plan, and another 40% plan to. So, I mean, this is encouraging. We try to get some information on, oh, I guess I missed, I had some numbers on business as well. And we saw some folks, I guess I missed that slide, I apologize, but some increases in profitability. I wouldn't say they were large, but they were encouraging. So I think this is a niche, probably a niche for a lot of people, but a lot of people are interested in naturalized landscapes. This has a lot of appeal. I think on our part, what we've done as just a couple of final comments is that I think we developed a really functional, multi-state, multi-organizational woods in your backyard partnership. We produced 3 very quality publications, actually 4 if you the actual woodland health assessment is actually in the back of the book, but we actually pulled it out so it's a separate document and it can be used separately. So there's 4 documents available. The Woodland Health Practices Handbook, the Field Guide, are both available from Penn State, as well as the original Woods in Your Backyard Assessment Guide. And that's a real key, because you try to do educational programs, if you want to depend on our university for publications, forget it. So Penn State has a really good distribution network, and so they're more than willing to do that. And of course, they reap whatever profits come from that. But it's very beneficial for working and doing workshops. You can call up and get what you need. I think we've trained a large number of green industry professionals. All the webinar trainings we've had, the Train the Trainers one we did, those are all recorded and available on our website for others to use. And I think we've, the Train the Trainers, I think, expanded our efforts by providing, training nationally. It's seeped out there. In terms of what lies in the future, I'm kind of obviously done. I know my position's hopefully going to be filled actually soon, I hope. And then some of this, may be a little bit more resurrected, but it's kind of been a little bit hiatus, because I did provide a lot of I guess some of the leadership for this. But had great people to work with, and I appreciate, like I said, the Hughes Center. You guys gave us a lot of flexibility, and especially with COVID. And I said this before, but honestly, when COVID came, it made it not possible to actually hire a person like we had originally intended to do to work on this. Allowed us to use that money in different ways where we got a lot of more productivity out of it, I think, and working with our group that I showed you previously. So with that, um, I think this is our website. You can go to it two ways: go.umd.edu/woodland, or go to extension.umd.edu/woodland. And you'll see on the top a link for the woods in your backyard. And if you go there and wander around, you'll find all the stuff that we've done there. So and you'll see some of our partners down here. Um, and I guess with that, I will take any questions that people may have.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. That was really great. Clearly there was a huge need for this kind of a project. I think that's evidenced by, well, you mentioned the 85% of the forested land in Maryland, that's 1 to 9 acres, and that you had, so many collaborators that wanted to work on this issue. It's a great project. I have a question before oh, I should say, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand, and Josh is going to be calling on you, and he'll unmute you and let you ask your question. And while you're getting ready to ask your question, I have one for you, Jonathan, and that's
Sure.
that. So I'm a big walker, and I like to walk in the little town that I live in, and I would imagine, just from my experience, that there's a lot of maybe public land that's in small towns that would fall in this kind of scope. And I'm wondering if you had a lot of participants that were interested in learning, that would have been, professionals that worked in these towns, maybe in their small parks or whatever, that wanted to try to improve and maintain their small forests or their wooded areas, or are those people already pretty well trained and not interested in this information?
No, we did. We had people, again, I said we had targeted the industry, but we found we had a lot of folks from, government agencies, or from, some local governments, and especially some people that had some, nonprofits, and had management over some properties. I'd have to look at the numbers again to see how many came from actual local governments. I just don't remember. But yeah, I mean, certainly, a lot of people are interested in kind of naturalizing their landscapes, and there's also the thing of trying to not mow as much grass and utilize as much resources that way. So uh, what I found, from the workshops we've done in the past with landowners, as well as people that own land in general, and it could be government, local governments, they just don't know how to do it. How do I take this lawn? That's why we had a big focus on lawn conversion. How do I take this lawn and convert it into a natural area? Well, you can use, like I gave the example of the perception of some people would be to plant trees. Well, they're thinking about planting burlap trees. Well, we can use lesser expensive with tree seedlings and shelters, which you see around a lot anyway, because these days, but as well as letting natural succession take its place. And but realizing through all this, land management takes some effort, and invasive species are a big issue with a lot of people. And I think I've made it, my opinion, known that I understand a lot of people don't want to deal with herbicides, and I get that. But to be effective, probably in some cases that's going to be necessary. So yeah, I think we definitely had some of those people there.
Thank you.
Okay, the first person has their hand up is Marion. You should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, thank you. This is really nice. I work in the Anacostia watershed, and I'm a member of many volunteer groups. we're working in, really degraded riparian areas and forest fragments in urban areas. And I wondered if you felt that these practices were applicable to projects like that. Most of the volunteers have very little training. Some of them are weed warriors or, uh, you know, uh, master naturalists, various things like that. But so, yeah, we're trying to get a kind of a small, some materials together to help out our volunteers.
Yeah, so we had a number of folks on those webinars, and I guess the best thing I could say would be to go look at the webinars we have posted on our YouTube channel, on our website. And they're all there, and you can kind of go through and, most of them follow the book. They have the book, and I think you could make the investment of, buying some of these resources for your people, and you could even have a, evening session. And we in Maryland, we're a little short on folks right now, but I've done, certainly done workshops in different parts of the state before. I have to wait till some comes on board to make that possible, but the resources are all online. There's also the online course that's available, our online course that Andrew Kling runs, and that's very fair. We don't charge that much for it, really. So I guess that's my suggestion, is use the resources. That's why we videotaped, or recorded all the webinar series, and
Okay.
and also to train the trainers, just for folks like that, so that they can get up to speed on some of this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next person is identified on here as Amink, AMINK. You should be allowed to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, thank you for your time, Andrew here.
Oops. Sorry, I think I cut you off. Try it again.
Yeah, species selection from, greater woodies, big trees down to forward lupine behind you there. Where do you strike a balance between native diversity, and succession? And I'm interested in those kind of approaches for small, like the 1 acre, that maybe need to be more resilient than 100-acre forests because it's so small.
So is the question, I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean,
Species
certainly,
selection in
okay,
planting in the woodlands.
so I mean, I kind of look at properties kind of divided up in two different ways, with very small properties. I mean, in any property, you're going to have areas around the house where you're going to have a lot of varieties and not real all natural species, right? And I think what we're looking in with a lot of the work that we've done is kind of that area beyond, around the house and those highly manicured areas where, you can have a whole range of different species, but sticking more to the natural species out in those areas, kind of beyond the gardens and things like that. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, let's say, you have an ash kill and
Right.
you need to decide whether you're going to let natural succession take over or you're going to, help it along. Where do you aim in succession, or do you not? And it sounds like you stick to native in your plantings, but even down to the forb level, how do you balance diversity and native if we want to be really, really diverse? Is that
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think at the end of the day, you got to work with what you got. And, of course, the emerald ash borer has just decimated a lot of these woods. And to be quite honest, what's happened with a lot of these woods is that because there's so much multiflora rose and honeysuckle, bush honeysuckle out there, you know, when the overstory trees and all that light gets in there, that stuff just takes off and it gets very difficult to control. So in some of these cases, to have a real impact, it's going to take some real effort to kill out some of that stuff to allow other things to come in. And so it can be very difficult sometimes. I mean, planting some things in the woods is usually doesn't work well. Then you have the whole deer issue. So I think you got to be realistic about what you can do, what you can't do. But at the end of the day, there might be some tree seedlings out there that were actually there, but after the ash died, for example. But and if you actually took the time to clear around them, that's what the chosen tree management is. Finding some seedlings or trees that are of desirable species, protecting them, and then killing things around it so that they can actually grow and get the sunlight. And in the case of some of these overstories that get broken up, and then you get the profusion of invasives coming in, that's one strategy if you actually have the species, or if you can establish a few seedlings of more desirable species here and there. I think it's a tough lift to try and get into forbs and really herbaceous material, just because that's so subject to change and so much impact by deer and everything else. That's just my opinion, but
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then our last question so far we have here is from Vincent. Again, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll see it. So Vincent, you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead and talk.
Hi, thank you. Vincent Fry, Urban Forest Manager for Huntington County. We have a lot of issues with non-specific vine removal, where people are removing our native grapes as well. Does your guide get into which vines to remove? Because our native grapes are just as important to our ecosystem as some of our trees.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think it's at the end, you have to make some choices. So grapevines, especially in a lot of properties where, they're old fields and stuff, they just proliferate and they're in the crowns of all the trees. The problem is this: they get up into the crowns of the trees, and when you get ice and snow and you get deformity and all of a sudden ripping the trees to the ground. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, certainly some grapes are good for wildlife, but you need to kill those ones that are really going to hamper your main overstory, and maybe leave some of the others on some more less desirable trees, or in some cases, get areas where there's just a lot of them, and that you almost have a a wildlife, can't think of the name, where basically all the trees are just inhabited with vines, and it's basically killed everything. But I agree that grapevines are native and they're good, but the problem is they just get so aggressive, they take over and they'll just ruin the overstory. So if you want those trees to be there in the future, that's kind of the trade-off that I would suggest to most landowners. You did cut them out of your big trees so that they're just not going to destroy your forest, and perhaps find some areas where they're on some more trees that are already kind of not going to amount to much, whatever, and leave them there. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm not entirely on board with that. I don't see a whole lot of native grapes causing damage to our overstory. They have co-evolved with these trees, and the native grape provides similar wildlife benefit. And if there's no risk issue associated with a tree, then letting it get taken down by a grapevine might just be part of natural succession and could provide other wildlife benefits. The aesthetics of it, I understand, but when it comes to native vines, they tend to usually have co-evolved with these situations.
To a point. I would disagree, because I've seen plenty of areas where, like, especially with poplar and some other things, they've just gotten up and they'll basically just, deform everything and actually start ripping, the crowns out of trees. Now, if you're right, if it's an area where maybe there's some hardier trees or they're not so abundant, that might work. But I think you have to be careful in terms of just giving free rein to grapevines, because they can cause a lot of damage. But that's a decision to make there. Yeah.
Thanks for that question. Next question we have is from Gene Schwab. So Gene, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks so much for doing this. I'm with the Tree Commission at Fairfax County, so I have a couple questions. I was a little taken aback with so much discussion of using herbicides there, and totally understanding at times they're definitely the only choice. But I was surprised, at least, or I didn't see, and maybe it's in the book, about sort of an integrated pest management approach on manual thinning and pulling first, and the last option being use of herbicides, simply because we know, especially with homeowners, they tend to overuse their chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers. So if some is good, more is better, and too much is just right. And it runs off into the waterways. So I'm wondering if you guys have a hierarchy where you suggest first doing more manual, and then the last choice being herbicides. And then second, when you mentioned about reducing the lawn and taking Roundup to the lawn, I was also surprised. And can't homeowners simply, as they plant trees, allow the tree and the tree shade to eventually kill off the grass and just leave the lawn?
Yeah, so the first question, yeah, when you look through the herbicide section, we have the IPM pyramid, starting off with mechanical methods, and before you get to the top, where you're dealing with, herbicides and things like that. So you're right, and recognizing those aren't for everybody. But yeah, so I think if you look through the chapter, I think you'll see it's fairly well balanced. But the other side of that is to actually show how you use these materials safely, and so we try and cover both sides of that. I think we did a good job. We certainly had a lot of experts in that area. Regarding the roundup of the lawn, I'm not sure. Maybe I misspoke, but so usually a lot of the lawn conversions, if you're planting tree seedlings, you need to usually kill the turf around the trees. Okay. Typically, turf roots go down very deep, and during the summer, you plant trees in the spring, you get drought in the summertime, and if you just put the trees in the turf, typically they're going to die, at least tree seedlings. Okay. So you really do need to kill the grass around. Now you can do that non-chemically. Certainly you can do that with mulching. You can do that with some type of physical removal. But again, if you start looking at planting hundreds of tree seedlings on a very small acreage, that's very possible. When you start looking at larger areas, that's where typically probably some type of herbicide would be used. But again, it depends on the landowner. But I would also say, and this is my own opinion, that there's a lot of cost share programs to establish, for tree planting, and to provide funding for where you're going to put trees into a turf and not manage the turf. I think it's just setting up for failure in many cases. So there has to be some way to get to clear at least a foot or two around those seedlings that you plant, so they have a chance to get water. Because what happens in the summertime, very little water, those roots are down there, and it'll just usually really do those trees in. So
Right. We're thinking, obviously like clearing out around where the tree was going, but I
Yeah.
thought I saw one of your earlier slides about killing off the lawn with Roundup, so I didn't think
not
that
sure.
was necessary. I might have misunderstood, so if I did, apologies.
Now, for people that want to get into like planting wildflower meadows and things like that, you can do that chemically, or you can do that mechanically. At some point, to do that, you have to kill the turf, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
one way to do that is chemically, but of course, that could be done mechanically. But that's a whole lot more difficult, because then once you stir all that up, you're going to get all kinds of invasive stuff that comes into, and so it becomes a problem. Yeah, good question. Great question.
Thank you for the question, Gene. And we have time for one more question, and that's from Mark Imlay. So Mark, you should be allowed to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I'll take more questions if people want to stay too. It's up to you guys though. Go ahead.
Can you unmute me?
You are unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. So when I bought my current property, my house, it's about half an acre, front and backyard going down to a creek. About 40 years ago, I stopped mowing, and for 5 years I had constantly to remove non-native invasives, but it all took was 5 years. And now I found out that there's about 24 species of natives, and half of them just popped up. They had been waiting. And then I just had to plant some more. So it just took 5 years of work, and now I just have to spend 4 days a year, spring, summer, fall, and winter, removing invasives. That's all it takes.
You know,
Well,
interesting,
right.
I'm sorry.
It was very easy. That was
The other interesting thing here is the interaction between like invasive species and deer. You know, you've all seen the pictures where,
Mhm.
you know, deer just wipe out the understory. But there's also been a lot of, you know, work done, like I know in Montgomery County and other places I've been where, you know, you put up deer fencing to keep the deer out. And under that scenario, in many cases, the natives actually can compete with a lot of invasive species. But when you put deer into the equation, the first thing they go for is the natives. So
I wanted to
it's,
say the only herbicide use I've had to do is cut stump. So you cut a vine that's too big to pull out at the ground level and put a little, I use Roundup Aquatic rather than Roundup, put it into that little hole that forms. That's all.
yeah, actually, one of the techniques that has one of the greatest applications when using herbicide is, you know, injecting is called a hack and squirt, where you have an axe and
Yeah.
little spritzer bottle, totally contained, works great. You can only do it, you know, from July until November, early December, but works great. Yeah. I don't know if you want, I'm happy to take any more questions if you want, or it's up to you, Josh.
We have another hand that just popped up, so Marion, you can go ahead and ask your question. You should still be allowed to talk.
Thank you. I really appreciate your sticking around. I liked the comment you made last about some of the species. Well, anyway, we're trying to reforest an area that was decimated by the emerald ash borer, and you know, we've got a lot of groups working on it. Got some trees growing, and we'd like to put something down, you know, to sort of cover the bare land. And we kind of noticed that. River oats do pretty well and compete to some extent. We haven't tried it in the woodlands. Can you think of it? I mean, we have basically zero money, so we're, you know, taking seeds from our yards and all. So do you have any other plants that you recommend? We don't have deer issues. We have beavers, but it's pretty easy to control them. We, you know, put fencing around the new trees.
So is this down like a riparian area, or
Yes, sir. It's really close to the river
and
and
where
next to a wetland. I'm sorry.
where at? Where is it?
It's south of the Bladensburg Waterfront Park.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I just I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, if you just need something to cover the ground, you know, rye, I know this works good, but I'm probably not the person to ask for that because
Okay.
it just depends upon, you have to see the area, I think, to make an assumption. But rye is certainly cheap if you need something to cover bare soil. I don't know if it's bare soil.
Yeah, that's basic. That's what it is.
Oh.
It's wetland. You know, so I don't know if, well, I mean, we were looking for native
Oh,
stuff.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, if you can recommend anybody that I might speak to, that'd be good. We have a person who advises us on what species to plant, but the understory, we got to get something going. The trees are starting to do pretty well. It's been about 10 years, maybe a little more. But
I would say in general, you start planting trees and people have this idea that, you know, I'm going to establish the trees and I'm going to establish what's growing in the understory. A lot of those things tend not to be all that successful because at the end of the day, you know, what's going to come in the understory is kind of what's in the seed bank and, you know, what's available. And many times the stuff that you try and plant as an understory shrub just doesn't fare very well because what's more native to the area or what's there already tends to take over. But that's just my general things I've seen in the past, I guess I'd say. But I'm not the one, so I guess maybe a local extension office. I don't know, someone
thank
more
you.
familiar. Yeah.
Okay, that's all our questions. Kate, do you have any final words?
No, I would just like to thank you, Jonathan. This has really been excellent, and thank you everybody for sticking around for a few extra minutes. But Jonathan, we really appreciate the work you did on this project and giving this webinar to share the information. And I would encourage everybody, those were really good questions that they could, I'm sure that they could Google the woods in your backyard and they'll come up with your web page and be able to get additional resources and people to contact who can help them with individual situations.
Yeah, so I
And-
just put back up my contact information, feel free to have an email, but all our resources are on our website. And if I can help in some way, I'm still working a few hours part-time with the university, so I'm still somewhat accountable. So
That's why I didn't mention that you were retired, Jonathan. I knew you were still working, so.
yeah.
We appreciate that. So yeah, so here's the contact information. And again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan, and good afternoon.
Hey, thank you again to the Hughes Center for all their support. Take care.